Giants seem to be that childhood thing that we lean into. We think of them as the monster in the closet. We think of the giants really as those childhood memories of those long, dark shadows coming across our rooms, feeling as if they are going to reach out and grab us and move us. Giants seem to be mythical, and yet they are ever present. The giants seem to be those things in our lives, in our childhood, in our young adulthood, in the transitions that seem to just strangle us. We think of giants as something that is a childhood fantasy, our imagination. But when we're really honest, the reality is that all giants are the things in our lives that seem insurmountable. I want you to think for just a second about the places, the people, the situations, the emotions, and the feelings that just seem insurmountable in your life. The giants in our lives, they show themselves in ways when we go to the doctor and we have these symptoms and we begin to explain it, and yet nothing seems to help us. It seems as though our physicians are merely listening to the symptoms and not trying to find the cause. And we go again and again and again, and suddenly our health issues seem insurmountable with time and energy. Perhaps some of us, the giant in our life is really looking at all of those insurance bills, those EOBs that explain everything. And we have a terminal illness going on, and we've been fighting with insurance, and it's just not happening. And we want to give up. The explanation, the time that it takes to listen to the insurance companies explain to us or half listen to our questions, it just seems insurmountable to even begin. Maybe the giant isn't about a health issue or insurance, but maybe it's about something that happened along the way, and financially you find yourself in a debt that every single time you feel like you're making a headway, something happens and the debt keeps climbing and climbing, and it just seems insurmountable, and so you just give up. The giant that we cannot conquer. Maybe it's not financial. Maybe it's not a health issue. Maybe the giant is really a lifelong relationship. A lifelong relationship that you know you've outgrown, that has outlived its goodness, and really it's pulling you down more than ever. It's the relationship that you keep giving and giving, and there's no receiving. And you know you need to get out of it, but you're so afraid you cannot take a step forward. Maybe the giant has something to do with work. The place is toxic, or really they just are doing things that are unethical. But you feel this squeeze of having to have the time off, having to have that certain paycheck to continue your lifestyle, and you feel like you're stuck because you cannot move forward, and the whole situation is insurmountable, and so you are frozen. For some, it's that middle school or high school where our friends are ebbing and flowing, and we cannot find our footing, and just to feel like we fit in is insurmountable. And so we withdraw. Giants are not just our imagination. Giants are not some childhood imagination. They are not just the things that linger under the bed or in the closet or seem so big. The giants are in our lives, are the places where our feet feel frozen, where it feels like we cannot find a solution, where the problem is just too big and we just want to ignore it and walk away because every single thing we've been doing isn't working. The giants in our lives are the places where we just want to run away at the thought of what is happening. And then comes Saul and David. Saul is a big, strong guy. He's a priest. He's been leading the Israelites for years and years. And the Philistines aren't new. The Philistines are an army that's been coming up against them for ages. But there's something about this time. They're across the valley, up on another rise. And for some reason, Saul cannot move forward. He's done everything he's ever done in the past. And just the thought of the vastness of their army has his feet frozen, has his mind frozen. And then David comes along. David's the scrappy one. David's not that old. And he's like, look, I got something new. Can I try? David is secure in himself. David understands that this thing looming, that he's giving it power. He doesn't have to give it power. And so David steps out and says, hey, Saul, can I do what I do? And what happens is Saul wants to hold him tight. Saul's like, oh, you don't have the experience, David. You're too small. You're too scrappy. Hey, David, no. You don't know. This is too much for you. You've never been in this situation. David said, okay, let me try. And David does something. He puts on this armor. He puts on Saul because Saul wants everything. He's done it before. He knows what works. And he says, okay, David, I'll let you go, but really, you got to put on all of my armor. And what happens is that David feels awkward. It doesn't fit David. It's not in David's skill set. It doesn't even work. He's never tried it on, and suddenly he's trying to do something that's out of his wheelhouse. And this is the part I love about the story. David says, hey, Saul, this isn't going to work for me. I got to be myself. I've got resources. Let me just be myself. And David doesn't let the idea of the giant freeze him. David just takes what is his, what he's always known, and he comes after the Philistines. In this scenario, the reality is that Saul is so afraid that he can't ask for help. The task seems so insurmountable that he is frozen and he cannot ask for help. And then when the help arrives, he wants it to be what he wants. He wants it to be a certain way. He wants it his way and his way only. And David teaches us that all of us have the ability to slay the giants in our lives. David teaches us that people come to us offering their help and their assistance. David teaches us that when we are our most authentic self, when we take the tools and the resources and the strengths that we have, and we aren't afraid to step into who God has called us to be, that's when the giants begin to fall. And so for all of us in this room, it means that sometimes we have to ask for help. If you're dealing with insurance, if you've got something going on, maybe you need to reach out to your insurance provider and you need to ask for a caseworker. Caseworkers walk with us. They decipher the EOBs. They help navigate the pathway for us so that we don't do it alone. Or maybe you reach out to a nurse or a doctor that you know, and you say, hey, help me read this. Help me understand what my physician is saying to me. Or maybe that lifelong friendship. The friendship that has just died away, that needs to be let go of. In your heart of hearts, you know what to do. And so you take your stone and you take your slingshot and you stand and you know that when you say in a loving spirit, I need to move on, that you are slaying the giant that is toxic in your life. Maybe at work, you need to be the one to speak up because somebody else is too afraid. You see, we don't have to be people that we're not. We don't have to be and live into someone's expectations of how and who we are supposed to be and how we are supposed to slay the giants in our lives. God reminds us in this story that we can ask for help and that we can completely be ourselves because our situation is going to be different than somebody else's situation. Are you willing to face your giant? Are you willing to be yourself? To ask for help? And to be the best that you can be, because when David was the best that he could be, it was then that he was willing and able to face the giant. God brings us into community. Are you willing to slay your giants and stand with one another? Let us pray.